Well, it's incredibly important. I think it's showing, first of all, the importance of the state, the fact that President Trump, J.D. Vance are spending so much time there. I think it's also showing the damage of Kamala Harris's policies. I mean, perhaps more than any other state, we've seen inflation really hurting workers, and we're seeing the real wages going down. And President Trump's proposals of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime are really offering a solution to a lot of Americans that have been struggling under this terrible economic policy of Kamala Harris. So it's showing the importance of it. And of course, you just talked about the real electoral math here. I mean, President Trump is obviously expanding the map everywhere that he goes, but you can't argue with the importance of Nevada. You can't argue with the importance of the state. You can't argue with the fact that it's critically important. And it's also indicative of a larger national movement we're seeing with a lot of Hispanic Americans moving towards President Trump at levels that we haven't seen in the generation, Hispanic Americans supporting a Republican nominee like they are for President Trump. So we're seeing a lot of momentum, and it's incredibly important.
I see on the notes for this interview, it says, what a great week for President Trump. And it's funny because I just wrote a column that came out today. My columns are read by literally millions of conservatives around the country at the Gateway Pundit and at my site, Root for America. And the headline, Tommy, is one candidate just had the worst week in the history of politics. Can you guess which one? And of course, I'm referring to Kamala Harris. She had a bad week. He had a great week. He's pulling ahead. Her strength is collapsing. Tell us about Trump's not only good week, but funny week, lighthearted week.
Yeah, well, I mean, the clear contrast here with President Trump going to McDonald's and becoming the first major party political nominee to work at McDonald's, and he's worked at McDonald's for 15 minutes longer than Kamala Harris ever has, despite her false claim that she used to work there. I mean, so we're seeing that kind of highlighting Kamala Harris's dishonesty, and it's also connecting just to the policy aspect of it. I mean, if you looked at the news shows following that McDonald's appearance, the news shows, whether CNN, MSDNC, all of these different fake news channels were talking about the fact that President Trump has a policy to help workers. They had to talk about it because he was there drawing attention to it. I mean, that was a masterclass in how to draw attention to your policy while also calling out your opponent's dishonesty and also having a little fun with it. And there's no denying when President Trump was there, the way that he was interacting with the workers, people in the drive-through line, how he really was having fun with it. And that's just one of the many things that he's done. He had a roundtable just today, for example, in Doral, Florida, with Latino business owners. He went to the Steelers game. He had a town hall. He was in states across the country. And we're also seeing that momentum translating into the early vote. So we're seeing real momentum for Republicans on the early vote front, on the registration front. And it's all culminating with terrible news for Kamala Harris.
Well, and don't forget, when I talk about humor, it's not just McDonald's. It's not just working at McDonald's with the French fries and the serving customers at the window. It's also the Al Smith dinner. He attended, she did not. She became the first candidate to not attend, any candidate, not just Democrat, any candidate, I think in a century. Last one was Walter Mondale. The only one who said no besides Kamala was Walter Mondale. He lost in a 49-state landslide. What a terrible miscalculation when there's, 22 million Catholic voters, and she already was on their bad side over some of the terrible things Biden-Harris did to Catholics and their beliefs on abortion, and she just botches it and won't even show up at their big dinner of the year. Isn't that just stupid campaign decision?
I mean, it really is. I think it's because she's terrified of actually telling a joke or being confronted off script. I mean, President Trump, if you watched that speech, it was hilarious. But even he noted in the speech that half the room absolutely hated him there, right? There were a bunch of Democrats in that room. There also were a bunch of Republicans. And it takes real courage to go into a room like that and start telling jokes. It takes real courage to do that. It's a very hard thing to do. President Trump did it. He was fantastic. Kamala Harris is obviously terrified too. And I think you touched on an important part of this. Kamala Harris is part of the most anti-Catholic administration in modern American history. I mean, we've seen that through the policies that they've had. And this latest example is another example of Kamala Harris's hostility to Catholic Americans. And we saw another example of that recently at a rally where someone was saying, Jesus is Lord, Christ is King. And she said, you don't belong at my rally. She basically said that they don't belong there. And I think that shows, again, President Trump, if you're a Christian American, President Trump has your back. Kamala Harris can't even bother to show up to a dinner and doesn't want you at her rallies.